member for the West Yorkshire Combined Authority. So first thing is, Scrutiny Committee. First thing is apologies for absence.
Mike Barnes.
Mike Barnes and
Bella's arriving late.
she's not sure. Apart from that, we've got a full house and we are quorate. That's good. That makes things a lot different. Any disclosures of the pecuniary interests? Anybody get any interests you want to declare? No. There are no possible exclusions of the press and public. The minutes of the meeting held on the 20th September, everybody happy with the accuracy of those? Anybody get anything they want to raise that's not going to be covered elsewhere of the opportunity? No. So if I can take that. Right. Well, we're on to the mayor. Mayor on our way.
Do you want to do Jane after introductions?
Right, yes. Well, what we'll do is, we'll just do introductions, right? Well, I'm Councillor Barry Anderson from Leeds City Council and I chair the Scrutiny Board.
Khalid Baroum, Scrutiny Officer.
Katie Wright, Scrutiny Officer.
Councillor Geraldine Carter Calderdale.
Councillor Richard Forster, Wakefield.
Councillor Betty Rhodes, Wakefield.
Councillor Harry McCarthy, Kirklees.
Andrew Marchington, Kirklees. Councillor Dave Merritt, York.
Felix Grimampo for Director of the Combined Authority.
Alan Rees, Chief Operating Officer, Combined Authority.
I'm Simon Warburton, Executive Director for Transport.
Lucinda, Director of Policing, Environment and Plates.
Councillor Andy Rontry from Leeds City Council.
Councillor David Jenkins from Leeds City Council.
Councillor Kate Haig, Leeds City Council.
Councillor Ralph Berry, Bradford City Council.
Councillor Paul Godwin from Bradford. Councillor Matt Edwards, Bradford.
Councillor Bob Felstead from Bradford.
Councillor Richard Smith and Vice Chair from Kirklees.
And not that the mayor needs any introduction, but do you want to introduce yourself formally?
Hello everybody, apologies for being a few moments late. Tracy Braben, the Mayor.
Thank you. Right, so we're on item 5, the mayor's update. So you've had a chance to read through the report that came from the mayor. So I'm now just willing to open to questions because we've all read it. So, Councillor Felstead, do you want to go first?
Yeah. I'll go first. So, my question's about affordable homes and delivery of the same, which is one of your mayoral pledges. And I think delivering the homes is the easy part of it. The much more difficult part of it is actually ensuring that they get to the right people. So, close to where I actually live at the minute, there's a housing estate being built and a third of the houses are classed as affordable. And some of that was buy to rent, some of it is outright buy, and some of it was for social. But the developer has sold all 150 homes to a London-based landlord who's obviously going to rent them out. So my question is, what measures can we put in place to prevent that sort of thing happening? Because quite clearly, they're not reaching the actual market they were destined for.
Thank you so much for that question, Councillor. And can I say to the Chair, firstly, thank you very much for requesting printed updates, because it saves time from me boring you all to death, speaking for like 20 minutes about what we've been doing. And there is an assumption that you know the details. So thank you very much for suggesting that. Regarding the affordable homes, now you'll know, because I've spoken about this many times in front of the Scrutiny Committee, how important for me affordable social homes is, and that's why it's been a priority. That's why I'm very proud that we have built more affordable homes in the last couple of years than since 2010, since the economic crash. We have focused all of our energies on affordability, brownfield funds, etc. That's why I was pleased yesterday to meet the West Yorkshire Housing Partnership that's expanding. It's a group of housing associations coming together in a very unique way that is not reflected elsewhere in the country, and getting feedback that ministers see us as a region of innovation and collaboration when it comes to delivery. That said, we are in a capitalist society, and there are businesses that want to make a profit and that they want to buy and sell homes. We are trying to disrupt that market because we know that the people of West Yorkshire deserve better. We know that it can't be right that nearly 80% of people's salaries is going on rentals, and that the market is, quite frankly, broken. When 1,500 households are in temporary accommodation, half of those with children, costing local authorities an absolute arm and a leg, we have got to disrupt this, this terrible situation. You cannot grow the economy unless you have homes for people to live in and that they can afford. Now, to your point about somebody, you know, a developer selling on to another person and so on, there are loopholes in this system. We do our best to do our due diligence and to be vigilant, but obviously we work with partners, we work with local authorities, private developers who have their own bottom line. I am very focused on who gets these affordable homes. We are doing our very best to make sure that those people that need it get it, but there are people in the market that want to make high profits. That's why it's been really great to see our partners, our local authority partners across the patch, absolutely focused on this, and a great intervention actually from the Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner. I think it was the day before yesterday, about right to buy. Thank you very much, Liz. Right to buy. And while my mum bought her council house and gave her enormous security for many, many decades, right to buy was being used as a cash cow. And I do think the impact that's had on local authorities' ability to house the most vulnerable, I think that's got to stop. And that's why I'm sure you'll share my pleasure in the fact that it can't be right that social homes, council homes, are being bought for 3-5 years and then sold on for a massive profit because of the right to buy. And I'm pleased that they've got further guardrails on that. So I can't answer your problem directly, I'm afraid, Councillor, but I share with you the frustration that there are businesses making a fast buck out of housing when it should be an absolute first need for families to get on. Thank you.
Come back with follow-up.
Yes, there's probably a caveat to this, because the affordable or discounted marketing rate is 20% currently in the UK. Now, I actually participate in this market. I actually crowdfund the development of homes on brownfield across the country. And
sorry, Councillor, how do you contribute?
I actually crowdfund to help some developers bridge the gap between their bank loans and the actual amount of money they need to deliver something.
Do you want to come and work with us? That's such a brilliant idea. It shouldn't be needed, but what a great idea. Congratulations.
Well, it's a great idea because we're quite proactive in terms of the way we deliver things. So it's another takeaway for you. The affordable discount is 20% now. We're building something up in Tim Farron's neighbourhood, and it's brand new homes, but we worked with the local authority there to actually set some ground rules. And it was fairly groundbreaking in terms of the houses are all being delivered 40% off the actual market rate. The homes are only targeted towards the people who live and work in the area. They can't be sold to landlords. The discount's going to be passed on from generation to generation, to households. So it's clearly achievable. The question is, can the combined authority kind of promote that thing with, or make those links to developers?
Thank you, Councillor. Now that sounds like a really interesting idea. I'm not going to sit here and say, let's do it, because Liz will kill me. Because I need to understand a little bit more about it. But Liz, I wonder if there's anything technical that you could, that you may know more about that could respond to that sort of discount, that bridging loan.
It sounds really interesting. Is it in West Yorkshire?
No, it's in the Lakes.
in the Lake District. Perhaps we could have a follow-up conversation just to see how it's working.
I'll send you some details.
Yeah, yeah, that'd be helpful.
I'll give you the commercial,
No, of course. Yeah.
but I can give you the background.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you. Right, I've got Councillor Haig, then Councillor Marchington, then Councillor Rowntree. So Councillor Haig first.
Thank you. Good morning, Mayor. I'd like to welcome your announcement of the extension of the £2 fare to the end of March, but I understand there may be further plans next year, and I wondered if you could update us.
Councillor, thank you for raising that question. It gives me the opportunity to say today we're about to announce that the £2 fare was, we made the announcement a couple of weeks ago that would be extended to March 25, and then it will rise slightly to £2.50, 50p lower than the national fare scheme, and that will go to 2025, December 2025. Really important that we continue to keep fares as low as possible, whilst also reflecting that, as we've seen across the piece, bus operators pulling back routes. Now, we can't sit by and say, oh, look, all these cheap fares if you don't have a bus that comes to your community. So it's really important for us to make sure we get that balance right. But I'm really pleased. We were an outlier. We were the first adopter of this back in September 2023. Government brought it in the following year. I'm really pleased that we can still keep a forward position on low affordable fares. But of course, we are wrangling some of the operators who are putting profit above people and are pulling routes that for them are not cost effective, which is why I am really clear the decision to bring buses back into public control was the right decision, because we can't be held to ransom by operators. They pull a route and we then fund it, and then they carry on, taking the bottom line. It's not good enough. We deserve better. And this is always, of course, part of a bigger plan, our transport plan that went out to consultation, and the mass transit consultation, collectively nearly 5,000 people engaged, majoritively positively, to have that plan for buses that feeds the trams with active travel as well, that London-style transport network that's affordable and reliable and green, that helps with congestion, better air quality, getting people out of their cars, tackling the cost of living crisis. You know, we are in a position where we can really deliver for the public. But as we move to franchising, and the whole of West Yorkshire will be fully franchised by 28, we are trying our very best to keep fares low. So I do feel that's gone down well. There's always that question about, well, look at Andy Burnham across the Pennines. Why isn't it £2? Just to say that both in London and in Manchester, they have a fare box from the tram, and also in London from the tubes. So they have a bit more liquidity. We will be in a better position once we have a fare box from mass transit. So we'll have an income stream that then you can sort of team and ladle. But for now, we're taking a view that affordable fares are really important, but so are routes. Thank you, Councillor.
You want to follow up? No, fine. That's fine. Right, Councillor Marchington next.
Thank you, Councillor, and can you congratulate Kirklees for the work that you're doing on social homes and retrofit, because it is so expensive. and it's so intensive, and you have to get the trust of the community as well. So you've been doing a really great job. Now, for me, my approach must be, surely we should be also looking at the low-hanging fruit as well as the more difficult homes to retrofit. If we are going to hit our target of zero carbon by 2038, everybody's got to be on this journey with us. Nobody can be left behind. And that's why we developed an offer that was for people who owned their own home. It was for people who are landlords, and also social homes and housing associations. I mean, anybody can be part of this. Working with us in various different ways. Now, we understand that the economy of scale is our opportunity, because there are tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of homes that are potentially within scope. So, introducing our solar, what's it called, Solar Together?
It's a residential buying scheme run by Solar Together. Yeah.
Solar Together, yeah. So it's like a reverse auction. So a community can request a quote for solar panels, but of course the economies of scale, more people that do it, the cheaper it is. We can guarantee that the people who are installing are, they're registered and they're reliable and they're not cowboys. But also what we have on the other side is we have a low interest loan that you can use for those solar panels. And it's been really pleasing to see so many people have used the whole system. But what was important to me is that not everybody wants everything. So to be able to get people to just sort of, in an approach, come in, the water's lovely sort of thing. If you want new windows that are double glazed, you can also apply for that. If you want just insulation in your loft, or if you want the full Monty with a ground source heat pump and everything, that is also available. So we've developed this very carefully. There's a substantial amount of money attached to it. I'm really pleased to see government are also looking at what more they can do in the retrofit space. And I am making the case to government, we are already set up, we're good to go. Why not, invest in us, and we can do even more at speed. Now, the big challenge for us as a region, we've got this fantastic programme, people want it. Have we got the skilled workforce? This is where our challenge is. So what is great about devolution is that we have the adult education budget that is devolved to us. So we are looking at programmes courses to run for the retrofit skills that we're going to need at scale. But your offer is well made, thank you. And we could definitely take that away about the economies of scale to do additional work with Kirklees when you're looking at social homes specifically. Is that helpful? Yeah.
Sorry.
That's all right. If I may, Councillor, just to say that we are taking quite a proactive approach. But Liz, if you want to just lay out the offer, so in a little bit more detail, if that's helpful, Chair.
Yeah.
Thank you. You've set out a number of things that we're doing, and the one-stop shop is going to bring this together. So we didn't want to wait for the one-stop shop service to be set up, which is why, as the Mayor has said, we've already launched these different products. The collective buying scheme, as the Mayor's just set out, we've tried it as a pilot almost to understand whether there would be interest, and it's really pleasing to see that there has been kind of over 4,000 registrations for interest. Now, that obviously won't translate into actual numbers of how many homes will have the solar panels, because as you go through each next step of the process, people get a bit more information and then we'll kind of drop out. But I think the interest is there, which is brilliant. So I think we would now want to look at, well, are there other things that we could do in that space? So are there other things that we could do a collective buying scheme for? And also maybe targeted at certain sectors as well. So whilst we want to do it across the piece, we know that, for example, private landlords have a slightly different perspective than maybe homeowners. So we are really trying to segment the market as well to try and understand what different products might be needed for different kind of areas. And I think, as well as the Mayor is saying, we are working with government because we have got the next round of It's called Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund, as was. It's now called Warm Homes. We're about to put a bid into government for the next round of that. So kind of fingers crossed that we get some further money from what you've seen already that we've put into social homes. But as you rightly say, the one-stop shop is an opportunity for everybody to have a degree of service. That's about to go out to procurement and will be up and running next year.
Thank you. But if I may also say, Chair, that we're not being tardy with our own buildings either. So putting solar panels on bus stations, we're looking at our own buildings. How can we make them greener as well? It's a massive effort. We have to approach this as if it is actually an emergency, and deliver at speed. Deliver at speed for what is in our gift.
Right, I've got Councillor Rowntree, Councillor Engels, Councillor Carson, Councillor Merritt, and Councillor Rose. So Councillor Rowntree first, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mayor, and good to see you again. I'd like to take you back to the housing theme, if that's okay. You used the word disrupting, I think, in terms of disrupting the market in your opening remarks, and that was interesting. It's not disrupting is not something I've heard used against housing market sort of previously in terms of policy, and that's I think that's an interesting one. I wanted to ask you in particular whether you have a view on different models of ownership. I mean, there's obviously the big ones that take up most of the market, obviously owner-occupier, private renter sector, local authority housing association, and within that, sort of certainly the economic power is to a great extent vested in large house builders and indeed with large landlords, isn't it? I mean, I've become aware from sort of sitting on the planning committee in Leeds of the increasing importance of a build-to-rent model where a developer will set out to build usually a complex of flats with the intention, it's so structured so that it will always remain in the ownership of a single landlord. And a couple of developments who haven't necessarily started off that way but ended up as being sold on the build-to-rent terms and so on. Do you have a sort of sense of a hierarchy of how you'd like housing to develop in terms of these models, and what preferences you might have, and whether there's any way of levelling the playing field to sort of try and redistribute the power between different sectors? I mean, there's other options, I think, like sort of different models of co-living and co-ops that are unlikely to be large scale, but also worth considering and support. Can you tell us a bit about that? Thank you.
That's definitely a dinner party question, because it's quite theoretical, isn't it, about hierarchy of priorities. For me, as I've explained, affordability is really important because that's our crisis facing us. When it comes to disruption, one of our biggest challenges was viability. So when we were looking at brownfield, we couldn't build the homes that we wanted to build because of viability issues in Bradford and Kirklees, for example. It's easier in Leeds because of land value. What can we do that is innovative to maybe bring schemes together, that one in Leeds comes together with one in Bradford, so the viability is, you bring the projects together and suddenly you've got a balance between unviable and viable, and you can get to a common ground where you can start work. What's really important for me is that new type of housing where lots of young people nowadays don't ever feel like they want to buy. They want to rent, but they want to rent affordably. They want to be able to move around, where the jobs are, where there's going to be 4 or 5 careers. There's a sort of new way of looking at homes, and lots of people, certainly lots of my young colleagues here, are all sharing, but they want homes where they can share, that they have space to work from home if they wish. So, or a place with a garden. So there's more quality of life, I think, that is a factor for young people. Also, for the other end of our lifespan, focusing on dementia-ready housing was also very important to me. That's why I set up the task force. And it's very pleasing to see that some of the recommendations of the dementia-ready task force have actually now been implemented by housing associations and some builders. So it is about the leadership. So I'm not blowing everything up. I'm not disrupting in that way. But I think it's about the prioritisation for a region, that this is the type of developer we want to work with. If you're that type of developer, you're welcome. If you're somebody that's going to build boxes that are ugly and that are, eye-wateringly expensive, then you're going to be less of a friend to me, because what's important to me is affordability and also quality of life for people, where they can also find well-being. And I have to say, my youngest is in rented accommodation at the moment, and she just moved to a tiny flat, £1,100 a month on her own, and it smells of chips and there's noise all the time, and you think, this is no way of living. It's horrible. But there is, these are the choices facing our youngsters, and how is their mental well-being going to be healthy when every day they're faced with all this stuff that's not of their making? So it's not a very sort of high-level response to what you're saying, but I would say, just to reiterate, affordability is the key. There will be people who want beautiful 5-bedroom homes, and those need to be built as well. And we need to renovate all our heritage buildings and to have that mixed offer, because we need people to move out of 2 bedrooms to go into 3 and 4 for those families to move from 1 bedroom into 2. So we need the fuller picture. But affordability is currently my priority.
Thank you. Just briefly, Chair. Thanks for that. That was, that's very, very interesting. I get the impression from what you've said that you're perhaps less worried about the build-to-rent concept, because you can see sort of evidence of it working. I had a bit of a fear from the discussions we had that this model had the potential to shut a lot of people out of home ownership. But as you say, if it's you do see taking the view that it's meeting a need. Just one last thing, you've used the word affordability a lot, and I think in sort of policy terms the word affordability has to do some pretty heavy lifting, because it's all over the place, and I think public are inclined to be cynical about it, because it's 80% of market rate is only affordable to some people.
Yes,
I'm
exactly.
just wondering if you think there's any other language that we could get in there that encourage the use of, that might avoid the cynicism. Thank you.
That's a very good exam question. Are you happy, Councillor, if I take that away and we can mull that over with the team? Because you're right, that for one family it is affordable, for another family it's absolutely out of reach, and that's why they need a council flat or a social home, because those rents are genuinely affordable. But that's why we have to move at speed to get more council homes built, and I'm really pleased to see the government wants to do that as well, when we've had decades of lack of interest.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Mayor. I'm going to stick on the housing angle for the time being. I do have some transport stuff, but I'll save that for later. I think it's really it's good to hear the focus on the skills gap with net zero homes, because it is such a that is actually fundamentally the problem, and that's one of the things keeping costs up. So and to the one-stop shop as well. 2 or 3 years ago, I was looking at a heat pump, and actually trying to find the information and advice as someone that is quite clued up on green things was almost impossible. So actually seeing that as being a big part of your pledge is actually really good. I just want to know how you're going to get that out there, because there's a lot of people. Now I've got a heat pump, apparently everyone thinks I'm the expert at it, and everyone wants my advice, and I'm like, and I'm just like, it sits there. But I think that is actually really important. There's a lot of people want that. But it's not necessarily the issue of fitting it, because it also then comes to the maintenance. So I don't know if for people that don't have a heat pump, the cost of service, an annual service on a heat pump is twice that of a gas boiler. That's the standard. So it's actually making sure we've got the skills, because that's a really important trade for a lot of young people that want to trade, and how you're going to kind of build that up at the scale that's needed. And then the slight kind of caveat to that is the new affordable homes, because it's great we're focusing on refit, but how are we going to make sure that the new affordable homes are being built to net zero standard as well? Because that, when I looked through the report, that was one thing that was missing. Because building a house to net zero standard, or as close to net zero as we can do, is a lot cheaper than retrofitting it later down the line, and that's something that is going to be needed. So yeah, I'd just like to hear a bit more about that, if that's okay.
Well, thank you for your leadership, that you're walking the walk, not just talking the talk. And I would, if I may, challenge the committee to also think about their own home and to think, are they bringing in any remediations or changes to their own home to help us tackle the climate emergency? And I'm saying this to myself as well. And I live in a weaver's cottage that is impossible to retrofit, probably. But I do think we all have our own role to play. So thank you for doing that. Now, talking to plumbers and people in the trades, the biggest problem that we've faced over the last 10 years is the lack of political direction. And it was, is it coming in? Is it not? What's this scheme's ended? That green fund has ended. Why am I bothering when my order book is full for just plumbing, straightforward plumbing and gas boilers? Why am I bothering training? So now I really do feel that with our leadership, with the leadership from the centre, that businesses are understanding that this is the future and this is where the work is going to be. It's sort of like with electricians and engineers and cars and EV vehicles, you know, to have that other set of skill set is really important. So that's why I'm working really closely with the College of Building to see how we can develop the courses that are modular, that are quick for businesses to upskill their current workforce, but also have those apprentices coming in with the understanding that this is the sector that they're going into. And I didn't know that a ground source heat pump was twice the price for servicing, which feels a carpet bagging, actually, unless it is takes you twice as long. Absolutely not. Blimey. Well, maybe it's something for us to pick up on. But I think I'm going to come to you, Liz, on this, because trying to get the balance right between the time that we need to escalate the retrofit and the workforce, what we don't want is to let down the customer and over-promise but under-deliver. Liz.
Thank you. It's a really great point, and we've been trying to take some learnings from other places who've started off on this journey in terms of providing that advice, and also working with the UK Infrastructure Bank as well. They've been really helpful in giving us some challenge in terms of how we've been developing the one-stop shop approach. And they have, exactly as you said, they have been trying to caution us in trying to go too quickly, so that you don't kind of raise the expectations too much and then people are left. Because once you have a bad experience, sometimes it then takes a while to come back round, doesn't it? So I think so we definitely have the ambition, but we also need to make sure that it's done in a way that the right skills and the supply chain is there. So we've been careful in terms of how we're going to do the procurement in terms of the expectations from our managing agent who's going to be running the one-stop shop in what they're going to be able to deliver. But I think as we've set out, I think if we can give that certainty to say we're investing, government, you know, is also investing, and so therefore the kind of stop-start nature that's happened before, hopefully we won't have, you know, looking into the future. But I think in terms of your initial question was also around how we're going to get the advice out there, because there's a lot of advice, isn't there? When you Google, you know, lots of things pop up, and we are going to be taking specialist communication advice about how we make sure that our advice can reach the people who need it. And just to reassure as well that we've also been doing some work with different groups, because recognising that certain groups, for example, people with English as a second language, or groups who are of a certain age who might be less inclined to use the internet, how we might be able to talk to them. Because it's really interesting that there's still quite, I think, a lot of misinformation out there about a lot of this technology. And even with social retrofit, we are finding that a number of tenants, even though this is free to them, you know, they're saying no to it being put into their homes for lots of different reasons. And so there's actually a lot of social barriers and communication barriers that we need to work on, as well as the technology issues that you've set out as well. So recognise there's a lot of challenge, but hopefully to say that we are trying in different ways to make sure we have a longer term plan, so that we can not just be in this, you know, what we're going to do next year, but have that in place. I hope that helps.
If I could just also add that government are saying that they've now interested in modular for affordable, and obviously it's going to be greener. there's a challenge there because modular companies have gone bankrupt. How do we incentivise the market, and this is obviously a government decision, incentivise the market to build affordable modular? It's a challenge, but we are in the space where we're happy to try it. We're happy to work with developers. We'll pilot stuff and we'll work with government to try and, you know, solve this knotty problem.
Yeah, I think the kind of the other thing that, I mean, obviously it's great hearing this. One of the, I suppose, the minor concerns is obviously we've talked about the ambition and what's needed for the target, but the scale of it as well. At the scale of it's massive. Like the waiting list for as a council house in my ward alone is 2,500 households, and that's one ward in Bradford. There are 2,500, if not more, social council homes in my ward as it stands. So this kind of the numbers that we're talking about, we're going to have to find a way of ramping that up, and obviously that's going to require massive government support and massive sort of support. So I suppose it's wanting to know how you're going to like ramp up that ambition whilst at the same time trying to balance, basically not trying to doing it wrong and then scarring people. It creates a bit of a bad reputation, doesn't it? Because that sort of happened with solar a lot of the time. That's one of the things that puts people off. Solar took so long, and then there were unreputable companies coming into the market. People have heard the horror stories, and that people are still living with that. And heat pumps are part of that. Even insulation, as well.
I think you're right, but it's also about educating the tenant, so that when you've had this work done, then don't just put all your wet washing on the heater, and you get mold, and then you get condensation. So it's also making sure that everybody understands how to live in these homes that are going to, you know, work for you and your family.
Councillor Carter, then Councillor Merritt.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Mayor, for coming along this morning. Can I just go back to the housing issue that Councillor Fosted raised? Surely we can tighten planning up enough to stop that sort of thing happening with the affordability element of building sites, and by saying that they can't do this. It has to be done through this system. A long time ago in Calderdale, we used to do it through housing associations to ensure that we had the in perpetuity. But that was done under the rural legislation that was in place at the time. Well, surely we can actually use that legislation to actually make sure that with the other type of housing that we can do that as well. And just on building affordable housing, it's a long time ago, well, not a long time ago, well, I guess it is, it's over 10 years ago maybe, a lot of councils in Lincolnshire did a scheme whereby they actually became the developer and they were the small district councils. They actually used small pieces of land in rural areas and actually became the developer, so that instead of the profit going to a developer, it was actually going to them. And that was particularly on the low cost to buy housing, because then that meant that they could bring it in at that 40% cost of what it would normally be. And they can then put the caveat on that it was in perpetuity. Under that, I'm sure that legislation will still be in place somewhere along the line, in rural areas in particular. So I just wondered whether that could be transferred and whether that could actually be uppermost in our planners' minds. We need to make sure we can do anything really within certain bounds through planning, by restricting what they do, by putting conditions on, by saying this is what you will do, because that is absolutely outrageous that all those homes have been sold to a London property market. It should not be happening, and surely we can do something about that. I have a follow-up question on transport, if that's possible.
Yeah, thank you for that. And obviously it would be helpful if we had that the evidence of that happening, rather than it being just hearsay. It would be good to, if you would supply that to us, it'd be good to have that. Thank you. Regarding planning, I think we're in a great position now. Obviously this is a decision for the government, but you have somebody making this decision, driving government with the support of mayors. We've been in these round tables with ministers. We've been making the case about the challenges for our region. These targets that government have set us are incredible stretch targets that we have never hit in a good year. So we are going to do something, we're going to have to do something different if we're going to hit those targets that they've given us. I really see that leadership from the Deputy Prime Minister and her personal commitment to tackle homelessness and to tackle affordable housing. She is absolutely laser focused on doing everything within her gift, and that is why planning was discussed very early on in the new tenure of a Labour government, not just from Angela Rayner but from Rachel Reeves as well, because she understood you can't grow the economy if people have nowhere affordable to live. So very happy to talk to you further about planning, but you'll know better than me because you're a councillor and you're in those meetings about planning decisions. It's not in my gift to tell Calderdale where to put houses or what to do with developers. That's absolutely up to you. But to your point about innovation around using public money, it is something that we've discussed, that how can we turbocharge our housing delivery? Is this a space that we as a combined authority want to step into? Obviously, it is not risk-free, and you could end up having your fingers burnt, and it's public money, but it is something that we have discussed previously. And if you have evidence of where it really does work, do share it with us.
Yes, while we're on housing, obviously the government's planning proposed changes are going to help get planning permissions in place. But what those reforms do not deal with is the problem of the big housing companies who have an interest in maintaining high housing prices, rationing how fast they roll out developments and all the rest of it. I wondered if you'd had any discussions, as part of your discussions with the government, whether you have been raising that side of the equation so that we end the the housing companies' whip hand on this.
Thank you. And certainly in York, I know housing is a huge issue because the cost of a house is often way beyond a starter salary. And I know that your Mayor, David Scaife, has raised this issue with me as a particular problem for York and North Yorkshire. As to developers sitting on timescales of delivery, that is part of the issue that we're hoping to change the mindset of partnership work with developers and housing associations. We've just got to get into delivery mode. But I would also say the challenge was laid down to councils and planning departments in councils, that just because it feels to you like it's greenbelt and it is green shrubbery, or it's a disused petrol station, but you don't want housing there, you've got to come with us. That local authorities and their planning teams and the public have to understand we need a revolution in house building, and we can't have our arm around our patch but expect homes to be built elsewhere. So we've all got to do a bit of heavy lifting here. It's not just us as a combined authority, but local authorities, communities, house builders, housing associations, cooperatives. Everybody's got to put their shoulder to the wheel to get us to where we want to be.
What, Councillor Merritt?
I have a separate question.
No, transport later on, right, that's fine. In that case, got Councillor Rhodes.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Tracy. Betty Rose from Wakefield. Very pleased to hear about the decision to build to rent. It's long overdue because, as you all know, previous government didn't fund council houses as they were then. So a lot had to go over to an arm's length company, which has happened in Wakefield. And I'm sure that this happened elsewhere. I think going back to Bob's point earlier on, it is a national issue in terms of buying up properties, including houses, for leaseholders. And I know that the government at the moment is looking into this problem, but that's actually causing hardship to those people where they have their maintenance fees just by 350%. £725 to put a lock in, for instance. So I know there's a lot of this going on, but we need to have something done to actually look into how this is happening, with companies buying up this land, buying up properties, and then setting up a sub-company to do the maintenance at extortionate costs. So I'm hoping that what's been happening and the announcement of it going to take a term of office to see to this is going to happen quicker than that, because we have a lot of people up and down the country who are in dire straits because of the increase in maintenance costs. One other issue in terms of housing, it's good to know that we've got a plan. Obviously, the skills shortage has been something that's gone on for years, has actually prevented the number of houses that WICA could have retrofitted from happening. So I'm hoping we're going to catch up on that. Matt has mentioned about heat pumps. Has there been any consideration given to where we build, or we get builders to work for us to do the build to rent on what's called a district heating scheme? We had those years ago, and they were very affordable to everybody. Obviously, they're a lot greener now in terms of emissions, and I think that's something that would be worthwhile considering for those estates where we're going to have the build to rent. The other part of the affordability, obviously, is in developments at the moment, private developers on a certain size of land are actually supposed to give over a percentage of those houses for social housing. And until we get the planning regulation, as Geraldine has said, sorted, what has been happening up and down, I'm sure, in not just Wakefield, but across the patch, is that they come back as a developer and say, we can't afford to give over those, we're not making a profit, it's not good enough. Can you change the percentage of land? Exactly. So I'm hoping that when we do get to grips with the situation in terms of planning, which the regulations state now we've got to apply to, we don't have any powers as councils, we have to go by some decisions and go to appeal, and that costs money on councils, as you know, Tracy. But I do think that the plan going forward is something that I think we've all waited for a long time. And I hope that when we're looking at the possibility of looking at modulars to deal with the shortage, that somewhere out there we're going to have somebody who's going to come up with a plan. They did it in the war years. We can do it again, but of a better nature and a better standard for people at least to have a home. Thanks, Tracy.
Thank you. And can I say this committee is always illuminating and exceptional in the decades of knowledge that people have accrued over their times as councillors. And it must feel very frustrating that we're back here again for councillors that have been in post for many years. So there's lots that I would agree with on maintenance, etc. Obviously, that is not necessarily in my gift if it's a private company. But just to your district heating, in Wakefield, you'll know that at the Coal Mining Museum, there's an innovative project looking at how we can use the warm water in the underneath the ground to heat the local community. We've got Leeds Pipes. Sturton Park and Ride uses excess electricity from the solar panels for the community that is an area of deprivation nearby. That is surely the future, and I know that Kirklees and Bradford both have small schemes on district heat source. That's the future, and that's what we're looking at. We see great examples across our patch, but absolutely in lockstep with you. And as we've touched on the modular, but yeah, I agree with you that there are ways to do this surely, and we see great examples across the world, and we are a place where innovation thrives. So the opportunity is there. So any developers in modular watching this live stream, you are welcome to come and join us.
Ask something about been working with a lot of young people recently, and we're looking at public transport and the perceptions of why people aren't using it, because one of the things we need to be doing is encouraging people to get that virtuous loop, what you call the fare box. That's a new thing I'll take away. I've got fare box in my mind now. A lot of the discussions I've been having recently is feelings of unsafety, people not feeling safe, particularly young women, and that's having an impact on school attendance. It's actually causing people to excessive car use, particularly in the location where I'm working, which is gridlock for several hours a day. So is there something we can look to in terms of engaging young people? So the theme running through everything here about everything we're trying to do, you've got to take people with you, you've got to co-produce, you've got to have people with you, and this is where we're at with the buses. We need to be getting the views of young people about what would it take for them to feel safer on the buses so that they're able to make more use of them. The clear feedback I'm getting from young people I'm working with is buses are not for them, and that worries me because I've got relatives in London whose kids use the buses all the time. There might be another reason for that, but particularly on that. And I would also pass on the experience. You're talking about modular homes and the history of homes. I think we need to be using language that's much clearer about social housing, language that people understand. We're talking about building council houses, aren't we? Because that's what the need is. I agree with Matt. The casework for a council at the moment is heartbreaking. There is no accommodation in Bradford. I'll say that again. There is no accommodation in Bradford. My mother was fortunate enough to get, in 1947, to get a tin house, they called it in Arbroath, a modular house. It's still there. And in 1905, Fred Willie Jowett built the first council housing estate in my ward, in Bradford. And again, that's still there. But I think the bit that you're talking about, how do we deal with the retrofitting and everything, we've got to work with people on why that's needed and why they will benefit from it. Just coming in and doing things to people doesn't get you very far. And I would make a plea, I don't know if TPAS is still there, participation schemes and approaches, because one of the things that's gone through my long period of council, I'm in favour of council housing, but I'm always struggling with council or social housing tenant management relations. There's a missing step there, which I think the cooperative approach might help with. So my first question is to you there, but I mean, I think the bit that bothers me at the moment, what's impeding our economy and many of the other things, is why people don't feel they can use the buses.
Thank you very much, Councillor. And it's something that was really at the forefront of my mind when I was trying to get people back on buses with affordable tickets, is that women and girls were saying, well, they didn't feel safe. That's why we brought in the M-Card, had a Safer Travel app. You can access the app and you can tell us where you feel unsafe. And when we cluster that information, we can then deploy our 15 police and community safety officers that we've funded, £1 million a year. That's a year, isn't it, Simon?
Yes.
Yeah. For 15, as I say, with a sergeant. They are dedicated to buses and bus stations. That is a breakthrough, I think, because you see somebody in a high vis, you feel a bit more reassured, don't you? So you can tell us where you feel unsafe, and then we have the resources to then deploy into those clusters, lack of safety. But I also think it has to start at a young generation. Families need to get out of the habit of running their kids a mile down to school. So we've brought in the 80p 1 mile, like a hopper ticket for young people. And also we've invested a fair chunk of cash with, what's the organisation? Safer Streets? No, Walk to School. Do you know what I'm talking about? It's a programme that where we fund the resources to encourage young people and their families to walk to school. And it's been very successful actually in Bradford. I did a presentation in one of the schools where the parents were saying not only did they feel that like they were doing the right thing, it was a chance for a chat with their child. And also it protects their child from, it gets their child used to the open air, talking to people along the way, just having a bit of quiet time with their parent in readiness for school and preparing them for school, rather than just crazy driving, kicked out the car and off you go. So I think it's a long-term project as well as short-term. But rest assured, particularly Bradford City of Culture, I want everybody to be able to get to these amazing cultural events by bus. And, being able to traverse Bradford, you can see something at, 5 o'clock in the afternoon and then go see something at 7, but know there's a bus to take you home at 10. So this is the problem with bus companies cutting services early morning and late into the evening. It was very pleasing that first have brought in the 24/7 bus in Leeds, and there's also one in Bradford. We're paying for the Superloop, the Bradford Superloop, that is reliable and moves around between like hospital, supermarket.
That's really good.
And that's a new one that also I think I've seen has come about in Leeds as well. So we're doing our bit and our best, but I think there is definitely more to do. What young people were telling us when we did our Safer Parks research is the safety in numbers. So there will be a critical mass. If you get more women and girls using the buses, more women and girls feel safe.
Yes.
So we just have to sort of front load our interventions to make sure the buses are packed full of women and girls.
Right. We've moved, and so what I'm now doing, going back against people who've asked questions before, but on a different subject. So I've got Councillor Edwards, Councillor Carter, and Councillor Merritt, who have expressed an issue on transport. So Councillor Edwards first.
Yeah, so transport, the buses. Yes, so the £2.50 announcement, I mean, that was actually one of my questions coming in, was what the plan with the £2 is, which kind of you answered before the meeting, which was helpful. Sorry. Yeah, the MERS fares, I can't, like, I mean, it's been said already, like, how important that's been, and actually having West Yorkshire leading on that has actually been a really, really good thing. So it's something I'm grateful for, getting the clarity going forward, because it is getting people onto the buses. I know people are using the buses because it's simpler and cheaper. So the first kind of quick question on that is how we're going to make sure that 250 cap doesn't become the 250 flat fare, because the downside of it is shorter journeys are becoming more expensive because some bus companies have just made £2 the default fare. So that's the first question. The Superloop, again, my ward serves the Superloop, and again, the importance of that for people in Homewood, particularly, who half the people don't have access to a car. There's no way of getting to a supermarket from Homewood without walking 45 minutes or getting a taxi. Now they've got 4 or 5 supermarkets they can get to within 15 minutes on the bus, so that in itself has actually been quite transformational. So that's a positive. One thing that really did disappoint me on the report is the lack of reference to interchange. I know I've given Simon and his team quite a hard time since I've started on Scrutiny about interchange, so unfortunately I'm sharing that load out there. As we're moving towards public control, it is really important that these sorts of things are right, because at the moment the West Yorkshire Mine Authority is the face of the bus station, so when people see it go wrong, it worries people when the West Yorkshire Mine Authority is wanting more control. And some of that does actually fall to, I suppose, personal leadership on that, because you are the face of the Combined Authority. And one thing I felt quite frustrated and a bit disappointed about is, I suppose, the lack of physical presence from yourself on that, like, to my knowledge, not going to Nelson Street, for example, and speaking to passengers. Because I know you do go out and about and see bus users all over the place, but it would have been nice to see you at Nelson Street meeting residents who are struggling and have been struggling, just to listen and show that human connection, because that is one of your strengths as an individual, isn't it, the human connection? But it's important we're doing that in the good and the bad. So I kind of how I want to frame the question, I suppose, instead of just having that as a criticism, I want to frame the question as, do you feel like there's anything you've personally learned in terms of how you'd handle a similar situation again and what you'd do differently?
Thank you, Councillor. Ralph, do you want to turn your mic off? I think that's a good challenge. Very happy to hear that, because no one was to know concrete would fall from the ceiling. So, this was something that came at us and has preoccupied me for many months, and has held back on our ambitions to talk about the good stuff that we want to talk about. So a couple of your points around cost, really important. When I was campaigning for my re-election, that was one thing that was coming up on the door time and time again. The £2 mayor's fares impacted people's family budgets and was really important. I'm really pleased to hear about the Superloop, and Homewood in particular was a community that I want to support, and that's why we brought Realise to the community centre there and opened up the community centre to run bus driver training programme. 150 drivers have come off that programme. I'm really pleased. There will be many of those people who have been generationally unemployed who now have an income that they can then support their families. So it's really important when we talk about inclusive economy, inclusive growth, what we do with our interventions and which communities we want to serve. To your point about human connection, because I use public transport and because I commute, I am the face, as you say, of the Combined Authority. I am available for everyone to come and talk to me. And if you were to be with me for a day, you would see that people feel very comfortable coming to tell me what is going on in their lives and what I'm not doing right and what I am doing right. So I did visit Bradford during the difficult patch. When I visited, I was very aware that our colleagues were standing outside in the cold all day long, in the rain often, and we had to escalate comfort facilities for them. So it's not just about the public, it's about our colleagues who are out in the rain trying to guide people. And what have I learnt? Well, what I've learnt, we've actually addressed, and one is that we have an ageing set of assets that we have patched up over the years. But do we have complete understanding of the vulnerabilities of those assets? Now, the interchange, as you know, is a unique and quite frankly ridiculous design, that it is a slab over a void and all the buses go over the slab. So that immediately sends the red flags and the alarm bells, doesn't it, in the design itself. So I have tasked Simon and the team with giving me a new option for a fantastic European-style new bus station for Bradford, because frankly, Bradford deserves it. We will take the advice of the surveyors that have been very thorough, very detailed to protect the public. I couldn't open it unless I was completely 100% reassured that it was safe, and then have a future plan for what we're going to do for the people of Bradford, because they can't continue being, the interchange being patched up. We've allocated money for the apron as you come out. You might see that it's now open. We're going to make that lovely. So as you come into the city centre of Bradford, it's a really nice experience, because currently it's rubbish. And so we've got money allocated to that. But rest assured, every day is a school day for me. I've spent 30 years as an actor and then went into politics not knowing a thing. And I've learned as I've gone along. And now being mayor, in the 3 years I've been your mayor, and what a privilege it's been, every day I learn something more. And could we have done things more differently? Could we have better communications? Absolutely. But I just felt if there was nothing to say, we shouldn't just go out on the airwaves saying nothing and just saying we're still waiting for surveys, we're still waiting for surveys. I just felt that, we just need to talk to the public when we have something to say. But maybe on reflection, people needed reassurance that we were still aware of the problem. Also, I do go to Bradford all the time, and the public tell me exactly what they think. And I do my own X, I do my own Blue Sky, I do my own Instagram. People talk to me directly about their concerns, and I do feel relatively plugged in to people's concerns. But if there's something that you want to raise privately with me, you must. But Simon, is there anything that I've missed there?
Thank you, Matt. And I'm aware of the fact that on the agenda we have a summary of the workshop, of course, that we had recently with Scrutiny Committee members as well, which I hope members found very useful. It certainly felt like a really engaged session that we had. As you rightly point out, Matt, there are a number of really important lessons that have been learned through the past 12 months around Bradford Interchange, and that real challenge that there has been for us as well, that it has been a necessary distraction of resource at a time when we're also looking to move forward on those very big transformational elements that we'll be aware of. I think as we've spent quite some time talking about in the workshop session, in addition to us continuing to build with the really valuable input from local members, including yourself, Councillor Edwards, on our local information systems, the most fundamental lesson, and as I explained to members in the workshop, that there is a very clear action plan in this regard, is to establish a very thorough asset management strategy within the organisation going forward, so that we are very, very clear in terms of the state of our assets and how they therefore need to become a priority within our capital spending going forwards.
I'm conscious of the time getting close to, we did say the mayor would be released around about 12 o'clock, and I know that.
Chair, I'm in a hostage programme or something. What's going on?
So, Councillor Carter and Councillor Merrick.
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to see the programme that you're putting in place for skills and work and health and further education, but the link with public transport is rural areas, because if you live in some rural areas, young people couldn't access any of this because they don't have any buses to be able to get to something at the right time of day, and it is a real problem. And not just the fact that buses don't operate, a lot of paid for services, as you've said previously, the operators pick and choose when they're going to operate this service. So one particular service, there's a bus at 7:20 and there isn't another one at 10:10. Well, you don't need to have an O-level in something or other to know that actually that's no good to anybody, is it? If you're wanting young people.
Who runs that, councillor?
First. Need you ask. So, you know, young people, mums taking children to school, anybody wanting to access a health provision, to the doctors for a morning surgery, you know, things like this are just impossible. And a lot of the paid for services in where I live actually stop at night at tea time. And the last bus is 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, which then that means that nobody can access anything after, you know, at further education or even work in an evening. I have somebody who is a security guard and he finishes work at 8 o'clock. He can no longer get home without getting a taxi because the nearest bus takes him 3 miles away from home. Now, these sorts of things need to be looked at and addressed if we're going to move forward with your mass transit, because there are little things in there that are really problematic for people accessing anything really. If you live in a rural area, it is very difficult, besides gritting, because that doesn't happen either, but that's another story. We won't bombard you with that one. It's bad enough in Calderdale at the minute without anybody else getting bombarded with it. The other thing is, and I'm pleased that you've extended the £2.50, but have you looked at what the cost would be for that extension and actually where you envisage the cost being met in the coming budget for the next year?
Thank you, councillor. Yes, of course, we were waiting for the allocation from government, 36.1 million, for our slice of the recent announcement, and then we've divvied that up. I think it's 11, and then young people 11, and then there's 12 left for routes.
Yes.
And also some flexibility in case the numbers of people travelling escalate, because we have to subsidise it. So we want to make sure that we can afford our ambitions. Now, of course, we've got the spring budget coming up and the bus bill. So we are extending the 250 to December 2025, because we will then know more about the financial circumstances. Because I really believe Lou Haig, as the Secretary of State for Transport, move fast and fix things is her motto. And I think she has a vision for buses across the country. And we will know more about her vision as we go forward. And to your point about connectivity, this is why we made the decision to bring buses back into public control, because the bus companies are playing fast and loose with the timetable. However, the challenge is to you, a challenge back. You will be in your community and you will see an empty bus go through your community every day of the week. We have got to get people to use the bus, because if you don't use it, you will lose it. So encourage all of you as colleagues in this endeavour to do think about using the buses if you don't already. I think that's covered anything. Is there anything you wanted to add on the funding?
Yeah, certainly. I was just going to pick up the point, and I'll capture the details with you afterwards, Councillor Carter, of the particular service, so that we can follow up with the operator. But the point that you make, Mayor, around the shift to franchising is fundamental in this regard. So, whilst we tender a series of bus services, it is an incredibly expensive and bureaucratic process that we have to go through at the moment to monitor the performance of those services. Under franchising, that changes because we set contract conditions for the network in terms of availability of all operating data. So we will know straight away whether a service has served or not. That does not apply, unfortunately, under the arrangements that we have at the moment. And the point that you make is absolutely right, Councillor Carter. If we're stretching limited public funds to put what at best is a skeleton service out there, and then one of those operations doesn't take place, that is effectively a service that has then disappeared for the day. So we'll certainly capture the information, but it's a fundamental element in terms of franchising, which comes on to the point around funding. For a number of years now, frankly, for the 25 years that I've worked in public transport, local authorities continue to face a challenge where at any one moment in time we have more access to capital than we do revenue funding, and that's a real challenge in the context of establishing an effective network across the city region. And it's also very difficult for the public to understand, isn't it? Because at one moment we're talking about spending very large capital sums on initiatives like mass transit, and at the same time they can't understand quite rightly, well, why can't you just put a bus down my street? They're different funding sources, of course, is the challenge. And we're working very hard now with officials in the department as this work is taking place to review policies around bus, to really look to make this point that the fundamental at the heart of all of this is our ability to access revenue funding to provide services in the first place.
Councillor, did you have a question about skills? Did I miss that one?
It's only about young people being able to access it when they haven't got public transport to be able to get to access it, because it's a catch-22. But just to come back on the bus thing and the fun, I've sat on transport committee a while ago, so I did pick up on that. I wasn't aware, and I don't think members of the public will be aware, unless they've changed it, that bus companies assess whether a bus service a route is viable, not as you and I would do it over a year, or over a month, or over a week, or over a quarter, over individual each service, each particular bus. So if a bus runs at 6 o'clock, if that bus is not viable, then they want rid of it because it's not a viable service. This is bonkers. They need to be doing it over a period of time, and that needs to be stopped. They can't do it over each individual service because that's an impossibility to operate, isn't it? I mean, no matter where you live. So that would be a plea if you can manage to stop them doing that stupid thing. But you no doubt will do when you've changed how you're going to fund them.
Privatisation of its best.
Yes, which no doubt will change it. And just another little plea for me, living right on the Yorkshire-Lancashire border. Can you please persuade Andy Burnham to let me use his tram with my bus pass?
Well, you're my kind of woman, so straight talking and ask for what you want. On young people, we approved at the Combined Authority £100,000 for apprentices for 3 months in their apprenticeship to have free travel. So to enable them to get to their apprenticeship, to give them consistency, to make sure they don't drop out because of lack of funds. And to your point about Andy Burnham, whilst it was quite frivolous, I think the opportunity for us as mayors to work together in an integrated transport plan is really great. And very, it's quite irritating for me in Slough to see the B network. I'm using the B network to get to Marsden. I'm like, this is really irritating because these buses are lovely. And I've got bus envy. But I think that integration, particularly in South Yorkshire and York and North Yorkshire, we can definitely do much more, can't we? And I think that's where the future of devolution is going to take us. Yeah. We're all on the journey to bringing buses back into public control. We're at different stages. We are talking collectively about how we procure at scale, because we'll all be wanting EV buses. Yeah. Where are we going to find them? Who are we going to go to? What's the order of priorities? So I agree with you that we should be working more closely together.
Councillor Merritt.
Thank you. I welcome very much what's going on in terms of the franchising, and particularly on page 19, the objectives that you've got in terms of rolling it out. Particular question in terms of franchising is about cross-border services. They obviously apply in a number of different directions. There are some quite important ones that head east through York, serves the Yorkshire coast, the coastliner services, and wondered how you were thinking of addressing those cross-boundary services as part of this process.
Thank you. Well, certainly in our transport plan, that's when we're looking at obviously what we're going to deliver for our region. But as I've just said to Councillor Carter, the opportunity for then the cross-border collaboration to enable the people of West Yorkshire to enjoy the North Yorkshire coastline, how do we make that easier? And it's not just by bus, it's by train as well. How can we have more autonomy over the trains that come through our region? How can we come together with a fare offer that is integrated, which is rail and bus? You know, there is definitely room for innovation once we bring buses back into public control. Thank you, Councillor.
It was kind of linking on. Oh, did you have a follow-up? Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. If I you talked about the integration and the discussions that I know are going on between the mayors. Is there any timeline on bringing solid proposals forward on that?
In January, David Scaife, the Mayor of York and North Yorkshire, and Oliver Coppard, Mayor of South Yorkshire, and I will be, with a fair wind, signing the White Rose Agreement, which is about collaboration amongst the Yorkshire mayors. And of course, let's not forget, in May next year, we will have a new mayor of East Riding and Hull. So the whole of Yorkshire will have 4 mayors. And in my experience, being a mayor is place over politics. So I am, whoever becomes the mayor of East Riding, I do believe they will want to work collectively with us. And the brand of Yorkshire, the size of Yorkshire, the size of Scotland, I just think we are in an incredibly strong position to have an economic offer for Yorkshire, a transport offer for Yorkshire, a skills offer for Yorkshire, you know, being able, an international investment offer for Yorkshire, a green energy offer for Yorkshire. With that collaboration, you know, devolution is not going back in the box. We have a government that are committed to devolution. We have to take all of those opportunities.
Thank you.
My question kind of stems from the point you made earlier about the opportunity for joint procurement, which I think is a really, really good idea. Some of the transport groups, specifically transport groups for representing disabled people, have had issues with some of the procurement in Greater Manchester and in Merseyside in terms of the way that buses have been designed. And it kind of stems from the point that Ralph said earlier about making sure that stuff's being co-designed, but how are we going to make sure that disabled people are embedded in that design process of the new buses, to make sure the new buses are as they're inclusive and accessible, and because I think that's lacking a bit at the moment, not just in the UK in general.
Thank you very much, and honestly, that's so important. That's why the Tell Tracy programme was rolled out in the early days of me being mayor, talking to those community groups that feel often that their challenges aren't heard. We brought in the Orange Pass, where you could you put your travel pass in an orange wallet, and just by showing it, tells the driver that you have hidden disabilities, that you need a bit more support. I also attended a really passionate and ambitious group of deaf travellers who were telling me that what I thought worked very well, the spoken timetable on when you press the button at the bus stop, I thought that really worked. But actually, hearing from them and their frustrations, I then went to the bus stops myself, and with the noise traffic, you can't hear a thing. The speaker was too high. Yeah. So we've been able to those are just a couple of small examples. But with mass transit, we can't afford to get it wrong. We're not going to be retrofitting because community, groups have told us that it doesn't work for them. So that's why we've set up a design group. But Simon, do you want to speak about the makeup of that group and how widely we're casting the net?
Certainly, thank you. So we're currently in the process of establishing a broad-based equality design reference group for both of the two major transport change programmes, bus franchising and mass transit, and we also intend to be able to capitalise on the same mechanism when we then look at, for example, the detailed design of new bus stations. The intention is not then to override ongoing engagement with a whole range of community groups, but to give ourselves a semi-professionalised group of colleagues with a range of different lived experiences, with whom we can then get into more detailed design option discussions and really kind of work through some of those really kind of challenging issues that then follow, as of course different individuals with different lived experiences are actually seeking different benefits in the layout of a vehicle, and they're not all potentially achieved within the relatively small space of a vehicle, and therefore those challenging kind of trade-off issues need to be able to be worked through with a group whose experience we can benefit from through really intensive design processes. And I'm very happy as we've started to establish the group to bring that forward, and perhaps discuss with the committee how over time you may want to engage with the group as well.
If I could just add, one of the biggest challenges that I've been getting feedback on is space in the bus for buggies versus wheelchairs, and that the bus will go past if there's a buggy in the space, and then that person in a wheelchair has to wait another hour for the next bus. This sort of hierarchy of need, how can we try and sort that out? Because that does feel to me like when the buses are every 10 minutes, it doesn't feel like it's a big issue. But when they're every hour or they miss and it's every 2 hours, that becomes a real life challenge. So we're really happy to engage with anybody on this committee. If you have people that you think in your ward would be very valuable to us in our thinking, please do send them our way. Thank you.
It was one question I wasn't intending asking a question, but it came up in our pre-meeting. There is an appetite among some members to want to get some dates and diaries to have a working group in terms of devolution. Now, the white paper hasn't been issued yet. Is there any indication you can give us today as to when that white paper might be in the public domain, so that we can start putting dates in people's diaries so that they can come to a working group? I mean, I accept that it's not necessarily totally concluded yet.
Thank you for that question, because actually the white paper is really important to us, because our growth plans, which are going to be guiding government's industrial strategy, we need the white paper to give us the tools to deliver on our growth plan. So it is all interconnected, and really important that mayors are at the table. And what I've said, who is at the table doing the line by line on the bill, and offering my services to be part of that conversation. Because as we all know, bills change as they go through committee. How can we make the bill as reaching as possible, so it's not the floor, but leaves it open for other further amendments coming forward as devolution develops and deepens and widens. But Felix, can I come to you on dates and any thoughts about how we've worked with government to develop it?
Thank you, Mayor. On dates, we expect it to land this side of Christmas. Our current working assumption is that it will be the first week in December. But please don't hold us to that, because it keeps changing and we are not in control of it. In terms of the work we've been doing with government, this has been going on, since the new government came into place. There have been several workshops and seminars and, one-to-one conversations that we've had with partners in government. This is not exclusive to us. Other combined authorities are doing the same, as well as other partners that the government works with. So until the paper comes out sort of next month, we don't know how much of what we've put in will be reflected, but what we've put across has been listened to quite keenly, quite closely, and we expect that our discussions have made an impact and will be reflected in the draft that comes out.
Can I just put on record, Chair, that I want to congratulate my team for working at such speed in an area that is new for everyone, devolution, about what do we need, what tools do we need, and to gain the trust of an incoming government, I think, is no mean feat. And we are regarded as a mature combined authority that is a test bed for ideas, and that is down to the dedication and hard work of the whole of the combined authority.
On record, a comment that I made the other day, I met with the chairs of the other combined authorities, and we were talking about implementing the new protocol that came out and the attitude towards scrutiny in the various combined authorities. And I was, even though I say so myself, very complimentary about how far ahead we are as an authority. The only other one that's comparable at the moment is Manchester. The others are a little bit behind, and so my thanks to you as the Mayor, because you're the one that actually has to drive it forward in terms of compliance, and the way that you want to work with us in scrutiny. You might not always like some of the things, some of the challenges I make to you when we were in private, but I think it's working exceptionally well the way that we're doing it, and the way that you've bought in to the protocol, and the way you accepted it, because some other combined authorities aren't necessarily accepting it without challenge, if I can put it as diplomatically as that. So thank you for what you've done, because I did compliment you on being one of the exemplars on the way forward. So let's hope we continue to be friendly, but thank you for what you've done, because it definitely stood out the other day when we were talking to the other combined authorities, the work that you had done compared with everybody else.
Thank you, Chair. This is ridiculous that we're just such good friends. I'm sure things may change as we get to single settlements, etc. But just to add, I want us to be the most transparent and accountable combined authority in the country. We have nothing to hide. We have nothing to hide. All we need to do is to deliver for the people of West Yorkshire. And if we've made a mistake, we will say so. But also your check and challenge gives us sometimes time to think again about something. We're all in this together. It's a team sport. So thank you for your dedication, because I know Scrutiny Committee can sometimes feel like, not the best committee I want to be on. But I've tried to encourage everybody to use this as a learning experience, to understand more about how we work, the areas that you're interested in, to really get into the weeds of it, and hopefully that'll be more satisfying. Thank you, Chair.
Update. You've been sent the members' update, you've had a chance to read through it. So there's just a number of things I just want to go through. So the first thing I want to do is I want to hand over to Councillor Edwards, who conducted the workshop on the Bradford interchange. If there's anything anybody wants to, any questions that you've got, but over to you, Councillor Edwards.
Yeah, in terms of, I'm not going to, obviously you read the reports there, like I'm not going to really repeat myself. We did try, the workshop I thought was really productive. I hope, Cameron and his team found that productive. Obviously, there was a lot to focus on in terms of what's not worked, but I think now the issues specifically interchange have kind of turned a page and we've got an opening date. So very much a large part of it was focusing on the kind of the communication side, I think, and how what can be learnt from that, but just wider in terms of the process going forward. And that's been a big part of it, and then making sure it kind of replicates to make sure that the learning from interchange has relevance to an asset wherever it may be in whatever authority. That's all I wanted to kind of say, unless anyone has any particular questions or.
Yes, one of the things that the Mayor mentioned was that the Bradford Exchange was a surprise. Now, I spent some time in planning and working with that, and I can't see how we employ all these engineers, anything should be a surprise. And I worked in a building with RAC, which is now being rebuilt, and they seem to know 40 years ago, 50 years ago, that it had a limited life. And we have lots of these buildings, as you know, that have come as a crisis, and these all appear on our balance sheets now in a way that they didn't in the past. So it seems to me that we should be working to a system where we don't have surprises, and I don't know to what extent that's being fulfilled, and whether we'll be able to get some kind of report on that, so at least it won't be a surprise to elected members in the future.
I mean, I was a tiny bit taken aback. Well, not taken aback, because I'm not entirely sure. I suppose the fact that it happened at that exact moment in time was a surprise, but I think it was kind of widely accepted that interchange was approaching the end of its life. It just kind of happened an interior, the timing could not really have been worse. But we had a meeting with, whose name is gone, Carl Peacock, who's the new head of asset management, kind of on a similar kind of tangent on this, and there's quite a lot of work being done behind the scenes to kind of address that and effectively mapping the assets. Because I think he was quite open and honest about the kind of the weaknesses of the existing strategy and how he wants to fix it. Simon, did you have anything you wanted to add on that?
Yeah, I just thought just to help, because it's an absolutely fair observation. So the surprise element was the particular impact that was felt at that moment around Christmas time of last year, and how as a result we had to move very, very quickly to take a set of immediate decisions around the interchange. The reason for that surprise was because at that point remedial works were underway on the carriageway, which were intended to address a number of the problems. Two points just to raise in terms of the age of the asset in comparison to other assets. So firstly, that RAC is not actually an issue in the context of this particular structure. RAC tends to be an issue in terms of ceiling structures rather than fundamental structures. So is not in itself an issue in the context of Bradford. However, the very common issue which exists, frankly, right across the public estate in the UK is just how many structures were built at that time, at a time when records management was not what it is today. And so, in effect, the work that we've undertaken at Bradford Interchange has been in part to create a contemporary understanding of the nature of the structure, because records management, through a series of different public bodies that have then existed since the 1960s, means that there was not a set of 50-plus-year-old documents upon which we could base a very clear understanding of the structure. That, in part, is one of the key areas of focus that Carl and his team have now been instructed by myself to focus on. The first stage of a good asset management plan is a good asset register, from which a good asset management plan can be developed. That is unfortunately the case. Every asset is a liability, I'm afraid, but ultimately we want them to be assets in the interest of the travelling public, not liabilities on the public purse.
Through, but this is a story that we've got when you look at bridges and all sorts of other infrastructure that we spent the last 20 years not reinvesting in assets. There was a time when you'd have a thing called a sinking fund to prepare for the eventual replacement of the thing you're buying. And when you're bidding in for things like 4G pictures from Sports England and things, you actually have to show that you will have one, such a thing. I think we need to be communicating this more honestly with the public, that what we're at the beginning of is catching up with years of neglect, because unfortunately you don't know when the next bit falls off a piece of salt corroded reinforced concrete made at a time when there were methods of construction. I mean, RAC was only meant to be a temporary measure.
Right. No, exactly, yes.
But then so were the raising of school leaving age porter cabins meant to be a temporary measure. And I think it's only a few years since, was it Ripponden High School managed to get rid of some of theirs? You know, I think we need to find a way of putting it in the context, because, and then we build things that still seem to fall apart. I noticed on Shipley Station this morning, I was looking at the bridges that are being built there and the sheer scale of rust and corrosion on some of that. I think, have we actually learned? But I think we need to be explaining to people, because when a bridge goes critical and has to be reinforced, it's exactly the same story, isn't it? Nothing's been done to it for 30 years. It was built by the West Riding or Bradford City or whoever. And people need to understand that, because it will help us when we're dealing with priorities.
The asset thing that I asked for our assets, because one of the things that cropped up was what assets do we have, and you on that list was the lay-by in the centre of Ripponden as being no, sorry, that wasn't on the list. The one at Rishworth was on the list as being owned by Metro or whatever we are nowadays, and I requested about the one at Ripponden, because I'm sure that one belongs to Combined Authority. And I know, Khalid, I asked you to look into that for me. You're just waiting for a response. But
I can certainly check up on that for you, Councillor Carter. You would be surprised in terms of the diversity across West Yorkshire in terms of different entities that own different parts of our system. So members will be aware of the fact that, for example, we have a bus station in Wakefield at the moment, which is owned by Arriva. Don't ask me why. It is. And that's an issue for us to address. The bus facility in Otley is actually a Leeds City Council facility at the moment. Again, don't ask me why, but it is, and again, it's an issue. So we are ultimately looking to establish effectively two sets of asset registers. One of which is, what do we own at present, and therefore what is a liability to take the member's point before, and then which assets would you logically expect to be part of a public transport system in West Yorkshire, and in whose ownership are those assets at present, and do we need to do something about that? So I'll check on Ripponden for you.
I think one of the really good things about what the workshop has at is built is forward asset management and understanding the timescales. Trying not to be in this position again in 50 years' time, which not only are there to scrutinise. But the point, I mean, Ralph's talked about council houses in your ward that are 100 years old. I'm thinking about all the buildings in Huddersfield which were being built when I was, top the bus station, stuff like that. It's actually a plan that we can pass on to generation after generation. Because concrete, these concrete structures are over 2,000 years old that get stronger over time because the Romans use it as a construction material. So it's not the material, it's that, but how you maintenance and stuff.
Some of us had the legacy of T. Dan Smith and the Freemasons. in Bradford, which the leader of council went to prison for a year, and we ended up building estates that only lasted 15 years between building and demolition.
What we found, again, some of the
That was
prefabricated
corruption.
social housing that was built on our patch, some of it is perfectly sound.
Absolutely.
You know, well over 50 years or so, others weren't. So
Yes.
actually knowing
Why?
that is,
What works?
yes, but developing a plan which we can pass on to generation after generation
Right.
after generation.
If we can just bring this one to a conclusion, because then I want to bring in Councillor Benny on his own particular interest.
Oh, right. Yes, I've got an interest in that.
Yeah, I mean, just kind of to summarise, I think one of the things that we're certainly I've said to Khaled is trying to measure the kind of the impact that scrutiny is having. I think that's really important. And I do want to acknowledge like kind of the work that Simon and the team have done, and kind of ties into something Tracy said, like it's being honest when sometimes mistakes have been made, and I think that's actually been a strength of this process, is acknowledging what's not worked. Primarily, I mean, if we're honest, it's the communication side of stuff, but how quickly that got fixed, because I would say the communication with certainly Bradford councillors in terms of the reopening has been really good, and I think that has been noted by members across the parties in Bradford. But yeah, I do want to thank Simon, because it's been fairly challenging scrutiny.
Right, and now one thing which is Councillor Berry and I had a briefing with relevant officers. So, Councillor Berry, can you update anything on the access to culture and sport for young people?
Yeah, so we've been briefed, and there is a small but very strategic thread and leadership emerging in Wycott on this. And I think we're going to use the model of, I'll have some meetings and undertake some work and report back, keep it lean, not overburdened with lots and lots of meetings, because there's always more things than a whole meeting can do. And one of the things I wanted to focus at was the impact of keeping live music venues going, and perhaps talk to some of the people around about what could, because it fits in with Tracy's pledges and the cultural strategy, and we're going to be doing some work on that, and if need be, I will try and attend some of the other meetings to feedback. But I think this is a good development for us moving on from the reformed scrutiny process, so that we can actually, as members, take on some proper responsibility rather than just being a critical friend talking shop, but to get a little bit more briefed and to own a bit more responsibility.
And it was a good one that we had. There's been a number of other, we've had some really, really good meetings with Councillor Barnes, who have been talking about some of the finance things as well, so that he's been kept in the loop. So that's fine. So we need to agree.
Thank you, Barry. It's been very helpful.
So we need to agree. So we're in agreement that the Bradford interchange conclusions and next steps, we're happy with that. We are happy to note that the asset review and asset management strategy has been added to the forward plan, as the conversation we just had. You have had the next version of the local growth plan circulated to you. Some of you have made comments, which will then get fed back in again. If you've not already made comments, but you would like to amend, you feed them in to Khaled, he'll ensure that they're passed in. We've talked about the budget workshop, which is going to be a working meeting now, and you've also heard about volunteers to attend the climate and environment plan workshops as well. And then the only other thing we need to agree is the work group, sorry, not the work group, the work programme. Are you happy with what's in the work programme just now and the time scales that we've got? Because we need to build in some with a little bit more clarity on the devolution side. So I think if we can task Khaled and Katie to try and get some dates in the diary, and let's work to them. And if we have to cancel, we have to cancel. But at least if we've got the dates in the diary, it's a lot easier to cancel, because certainly from my personal point of view, trying to do the Leeds City Council work as well, is that sometimes the diaries get very, very confused as to where we are and rushing from here to there. And if they're also online meetings, it's a lot easier to run them up to within, say, 5-10 minutes of your previous meeting and still make it. Councillor Merritt.
Sorry, I had problems getting here for the pre-meeting this morning, but can I just understand the position on the climate change workshops that you referred to?
Yeah, basically what the suggestion, basically what, sorry? Basically what the suggestion is, that on Tuesday there is a paper coming to the climate group formally, and they are going to suggest that there are some workshops taking place in the whole of West Yorkshire between the 27th of December and the 15th of January. And the suggestion is, well, actually, I'll be better to bring in the genius that I have appointed to the role. Do you want to just briefly outline it?
Sorry, thanks, Barry. David, I think you're just going to say, I think the workshops might be starting in November, not December. Sorry, right. I think you said December. Right. Understandable, because we're talking about the thing. So, Dave, what we're asking for is there's going to be those workshops once the plan has been released out for consultation, and we want members of Scrutiny to come forward and volunteer to be part of those workshops, and obviously a kind of to be part of a smaller group who are going to sort of, share their ideas and views and really sort of get to grips with this, so we can obviously do the job of scrutiny, report back to the Scrutiny Committee, and there is a potential that we may then decide to do a specific workshop on it, but we want the information from the formal workshops first before we make that decision. Is that okay?
Okay, that's fine, good.
We'll get a list of the dates.
Yeah. Councillor Rhodes?
Thanks, Chair. Could I make a comment on the format of the work programme, if I may? I think there's a column that might be of use to us as members and your good self as well, in that where there is planned activity or something to be reported and has been delayed, another column might be useful to add to say the reason why it's been delayed.
Yeah. Yes.
And when I look at today's, for instance, monitoring and delivery of the Gateway Review, it says final report due November 24, officers to update Scrutiny Chair. And then it says separate workshop, etc., etc., etc. So if we have that fourth column and anything has been delayed for whatever reason and it's got to be put back and come back, I think that would be useful for us all to have a view of the purpose of the fourth column of the work programme. Secondly, could I ask how, I know we've discussed the work programme, there's a heck of a lot in it for us to do. How does this align with the workload and the forward plan of WICA as the main body committee? So we can actually track in our programme here the issues that come forward to the main body, whether it's in an overview situation or to bring it up here to make a challenge from committee.
Yeah, well, hopefully on that, I would not say it's in perfect lockstep, but Khaled has tried to work with the relevant officers, looked at the forward plan and is trying to make sure that it's happening. For example, we were going to have in January a major discussion on transport related items, but we've now been advised that some of those just will not be anywhere near. There's the consultation, for example, that some of us have been contributing to has not yet been properly analysed, and so until that's been done, we can't then form any opinions as to what do our residents think about various things. Do you want to add anything to that, Charles?
Only that we can add the forward.
You tell me to be get you back.
Only we can find and add the actual combined authorities forward plan, to this pack for future if you want. But I have tried to capture in that middle column, milestones where things are going on certain days to the combined authority or transport committee or whatever. But we can make that clearer.
Yeah.
Just as the chair has mentioned previously, there are issues that are very relevant to the work programme, but time is going to dictate when they come forward. And in that column, in the fourth column, it would be indicative of saying, well, that's been delayed because of. Yeah. It's useful to know.
Yeah. I would also suggest that maybe we keep this as a live document, so that if we're not meeting and say till January, we maybe send an update out in December, so you've then got a rough idea as to what's happened in the interim, because I and a number of other members are getting briefings on various subjects, and so if we feed into that, it then becomes a bit of a live document, and then people know exactly what's happening. So we're all agreed on those things, and so that, sorry, yes?
I just wanted to ask on that 24th of January transport list, those are obviously sort of policy topics. Are we also going to talk about LTP delivery and how well the existing LTP is being delivered and the future one?
Yes, yes.
Thank you. Thank
We
you.
can incorporate that into it, yes.
Could I also ask on the later document for plan of key decisions, on page 7 there's the City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement Rail Accessibility Package, step-free station access. There's one scheme listed, and only one, which, given the number of rail stations, sort of struck me as a bit glacial, shall we say, in terms of progress.
What page number is that on the new report?
Forward plan of key decisions from 1st of November, page 7, top line.
City Region Sustainable.
Yeah, yeah. So if there's only one station being upgraded in the year, and given the number of stations where we still don't have disabled access, I was just wondering about whether there should be questions being asked about how fast we're going to ensure disabled access. I know the government's previous legislation, I think, had 2025 as a year when everything had to be accessible, but we appear to be a long way off meeting that.
Certainly that particular issue was discussed at the last transport meeting as well, about the accessibility of some of the stations and some of the problems that were being caused, particularly in the Bradford area. Menston station was mentioned as one that seems to have a particular accessibility issue.
Yeah, the bridge is being built and it'll be ready. They say to me, end of this year. I met with Northern Rail to discuss that. But some of the other stations have been upgraded. But the strange thing is that there's no accessibility because the disabled access is gated off.
Yeah.
I think it is a good point maybe to look at, something we could probably do, because it's also what stations that are considered accessible but perhaps aren't. So for example, I mean, Ralph mentioned Shipley train station. In an evening in a heavy rain, it's got two accessibility points that aren't, neither of them are accessible because one's flooded and the other the lift's turned off. So I think that's probably something we can pick up on as scrutiny.
No, okay. So in that case, thank you very much for your attendance today. I thought that was an excellent meeting in terms of debating things with the Mayor. It showed that we have a grip on what's happening in terms of the challenges that we put forward to her and the way that it was done. Oh right, yes, yes. The final one rural issues. A number of you have raised concerns about the impact on the rural communities that we've got. So I had a meeting yesterday with Alan. It was originally meant to be with Ben Still, but with Alan Rees and with Sarah Eaton, because I wanted to set up and get some of you to work together on that. The view of Alan is that rural issues are taken into consideration in everything that the combined authority does. Disagreed. So are you happy if I set up a rural working group to look into those issues, that we go ahead and do it, even though the officers don't think it's a good idea? Do you feel that it would be worthwhile at least scoping out to find out the connectivity of all of these different plans that are going on, particularly semi-rural wards? I mean, your ward is semi-rural to a certain extent as well. Although you might say, you actually represent a city ward, but it's got a relatively large rural side to it, and connectivity can be a bit of a problem. So you're quite happy if we set up, because I can't do anything without your permission. Councillor Haig.
As you pointed at me in my ward, I think I want more clarity on what these rural issues are that are distinct from urban issues, and are we going to, as a counterpoint, then need an urban issues working group as well? Or is it within the whole range of what we do? I mean, there's a variety of different types of ward represented around this table in different parts of West Yorkshire. So what specific issues are unique to rurality, and are we, as a counterpoint, going to have ones that are unique to being in an urban environment?
What I'd be planning to do is, now that if you're happy to do it, I'll commission that we'll have a Teams meeting and we will actually develop up some points of reference and some scoping. We'll scope out what we want to look at, who we need to speak to, and who's going to lead on it. So at this stage, I honestly don't know what is and isn't going to come. In rural transport will definitely be one. Accessing skills and various other things are another as well. And the impact on nighttime economy, getting to things. I mean, you know, in some of our wards, you can't get to the theatres that maybe are operating in some of our places, or in Councillor Berry's case, get to some of the music venues because the public transport system. So, but I would just suggest that we scope it out, and if when we scope it out we don't find that there's enough to go on, fine, we close it down. If, however, we do find that there's enough to go on, then we develop it further.
I would just challenge that in that there are areas of urban isolation, areas of urban areas that have challenges as well around some of those issues you've raised. So I do, I just wonder why we're particularly focusing on that when maybe it's a broader issue that affects
I would disagree
more
with
people.
that, because I think that the authority as a whole is directed towards all the urban areas, and if it's the rural areas that don't get a look in, to be quite honest with you.
I mean, apart from, there are parts of Bradford that are definitely rural. But yeah, well, and I was going to say, well, Leeds is 2/3. Leeds is 2/3 rural.
All the West Yorkshire Met authorities
Are 2/3 rural, 1/3. Yeah. So that was why.
Calderdale's more.
Yeah.
Calderdale's higher than 2/3.
Well, sorry, at least then.
But you know what I mean,
Yeah. So that was the reason behind it. Is it was something that tends to not necessarily. I'm not saying they should have a paragraph in every single report, but when you're doing an analysis on a number of other things like climate change or compliance with equalities, we maybe need to have something in it to say that we've looked at what impact this may have on the rural areas, because it definitely does have an.
I'm not against the being, because I've done jobs and I've worked as a probation officer in Calderdale years ago, and I can tell you there are pockets of poverty and deprivation in all of these areas.
Yeah.
But I think some of the things relate to when we have the floods in Calderdale, those are issues that you want to look at, aren't they? The impact of climate change on flooding. And then there are pockets of poverty and inequality does express itself. I can take you to a poor part of Ilkley.
Mm.
There is
Of course,
poverty.
oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And so what's happening with the skills and things like that? I don't see this as the urban against the rural. I think framing that is really unhelpful, because really one of the things that I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get the people where I'm working to get out into the rural, because it's good for their mental health and well-being to do so, and it'll challenge the stereotypes of sorts of things. So that's another agenda. So I think we need to be careful how we frame it, but there are undoubtedly issues to do with transport, access, particularly affecting young people. I have a daughter who lives in a place called Carlton in Skipton. Lived there, she's got her own house now. I mean, for young people in those areas with no public transport and all those things, I've worked with families who are trying to negotiate separated parenting across rural areas with no bus possible. So I think we need to do what you've suggested, which is identify the areas you want to look at. But at every point, just remember it's just as difficult trying to get good quality cheap food in Buttershaw as it is in Cornwall.
Yeah.
I know I've missed a lot of this conversation, Chair. I was trying to sort my rural buses out that don't exist and to help people get to work and get to cultural activities and things. That's what I was trying to do. I wondered, years ago we used to have on every report rural proofing. And that went out the window quite some time ago because we didn't have that rurality split anymore. But I wondered, is it possible for us to have a workshop or something, or a group of us that actually look at the rural, the impact of everything that the combined authority does on the rural area?
That is what we were suggesting. That's what we were suggesting.
I know there shouldn't be a rural against urban, and I accept everything that you say. But I've just given him a piece of paper that says that no young person who lives in my area can go out at night because the last bus is 7:30. You know, and they can't go to work, so they can't get an evening job because they can't get back on a bus. And we're not talking about somewhere in the middle of nowhere. I mean, I live in Ripon, yeah, I know it's not a very urban place to live. But everywhere around there, this is what you contend with on a daily basis. But yet when the motorway closes, we can't get anywhere either because every bit of traffic comes through Ripon, whether it be down or westbound. And it would help if we could just look at things in a bit of a different
That's why I'm suggesting that we just get together, scope it out, and if there are areas where there's overlap with urbanised areas as well, we then look to see whether or not what we can do to try and reflect back those concerns as well, back to, because our job is just to reflect back to officers and to the leaders that we need to do it. I mean, the comment I made the other day was there's a representative from Calderdale who's been at a lot of meetings recently. I forget the lady's name, but she has contributed brilliantly to all of the meetings by pointing out the issues that Calderdale has to face up to. So, and this is a Labour member, so what I'm trying to say, so what I'm saying is that it is a cross-party issue, because this person had been very, very eloquent at the meetings recently, explaining the issues that they've got. So that's why I wanted to try and address it. Yes, we've all got it in all of our councils. We've got urban and we've got semi-urban. And when does something become urban from semi-urban? When does something become semi-rural from rural? But what we've got to do is we're trying to represent every single person. It came home to me when we had the debate on the Leeds economic strategy at the last scrutiny meeting, where there was a feeling that it was too Leeds centric. Sorry? Sorry. That's exactly. Sorry. I can't help being a Leeds councillor. I do apologise for that. But there was a lot of concern raised, and since then, there has been concern raised that even the changes that have been made as a result of our contribution haven't moved far enough in terms of it being Leeds-centric. Now, for good or for bad. So what we need to do is try and give information to those that make the decisions that they need to take more notice of the rural on one side, and those people who are in pockets within the urban area where they are suffering just as badly as any urban person is. I mean, I know, being parochial for a minute, in Leeds city centre, in and around Holbeck, believe it or not, they have problems getting the bus service to come along. And that's only within 2 miles of the city centre. So theoretically they could walk, but trying to get a bus service into Holbeck has been proving extremely difficult. So yes, I am aware of these concerns.
Yes, it's just a small point.
Yeah.
But the reason it's Leeds-centric is because you have a railway that runs here, a motorway that runs here, and you're very well connected. A century ago, it would be Bradford-centric.
Yeah.
And the reason it isn't Bradford-centric anymore is the lack of the railway and the lack of the road.
Yeah.
That's the message I think needs to be.
Yeah. Councillor Hayes?
I think I made this point last time as well, that Leeds is, after London and Birmingham, it's the third biggest city in this country. It's not just regionally important, it's not just important within West Yorkshire, it's nationally and Europeanly and world important city. So, so whilst I understand people who represent areas outside Leeds want those areas represented, I do think we have to recognise, that Leeds, like in Manchester, which is 10 authorities with quite a small authority called Manchester in the middle of it, that is where people will focus, and the other areas benefit from that. It's not a threat, it's actually a benefit.
But without getting too political, that's the whole point.
I think, Chairman, to draw this to
Yeah.
conclusion, we could all say, wherever we come from, that we
Yeah.
have all our own issues.
Exactly.
And I think when you look at the main item within that agenda that benefits or should benefit everybody is the transport.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
the transport.
No,
We have to recognise.
I totally agree. I mean,
We have to recognise that the situation in population terms has changed, but the change has brought about demands that we haven't got to enable people to engage in their own areas. And if we don't get the transport policy right, and that should be part of the main agenda of the itself, we've heard it today, that should be the mass transit, and it should be there to say I think the question I would say is, what benefits are going to accrue out of this mass transport plan, which is the main area that will benefit all of us?
yes. Connectivity. Right, so with that said, thank you all very much for your time, and we will meet in January, I think.